This was one of those days in Formula One when the on-track action was not so important because it was all happening off-track in the political arena, specifically with a big summit about F1's engine future. Now, John, that happened away from the circuit this morning, before any of the running happened. Some pretty big decisions have been taken, but one thing we do know, which I think we knew before, but now it's confirmed, is that the hope for, from some people, return to V10s, that's definitely not happening next year, but it could down the line.
Yeah, so it was a big engine summit today. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, summoned all the manufacturers to this meeting just to discuss where we go from here. It was quite open table discussion. And there were kind of two aims from it, which goes back to questions we've talked about since China. The first is, should F1 look to a different engine for the future? Should it be a V10? Should it be a V8? Does it have KERS? Does it have a turbo? So this is the questions. There was some, we've had debate over recent weeks. Does it come in 26? Does it come in 27, 28 or later?
26 was never really possible,
no, but 26 was fantasy stuff to think that could even be feasible. So the consensus say from manufacturers was, generally open to the idea, but it gets kicked down. 29, potentially the earliest, but it's looking more likely for 30 or even 31 after the current rule cycle is finished anyway. To be defined what it is, but I think we're nudging towards potentially a V8. It will definitely have KERS. It will definitely be fully sustainable. And it will be low cost and simplistic, basically. So that's the main aim. So that's been kicked down. But more interesting for the short term is what happens for next season. I think there's concerns that after a season as close as this, new regs are going to blow the grid apart. There's going to be big gaps. And with homologation, with some restrictions on what they can develop in terms of the power unit, battery, fuels, if you're behind next year, you're behind for 5 years, which isn't good enough. So from what I understand, there's been some outline agreements, nothing defined in terms of what the rules say, but some moves to free up homologation. So if you are behind, you can catch up. There should be some tweaks to the regulations at some point to sort of this problem of derating of the cars losing all their battery power and having to lift and coast on the straights. One team principal told me today that some tracks, if things don't change, they could be lifting and coasting qualifying, which is a crazy situation.
And that's all because you need to be able to generate enough of that electrical energy to put into the battery to use that full power in that 50-50 split. And there's just not enough ways to harvest it without effectively using your engine pretty much to charge the battery, even on a straight.
Exactly. So there's some problems that need to be ironed out. I think someone described them to me today as like kind of bumps in the road for 26. So we've made some progress. I don't think we can think that we're in a situation where 26 is now going to be glorious and it's going to be super close and a fantastic fight. I think there's still headaches to get cured. I think there's still some progress to be made in refining the regulations. But I think now we've got agreement, we've got consensus. I think all the manufacturers are quite aligned now in terms of where we go for the future and quite calm. One team boss said to me today it was the best meeting he's had in Formula One since he's been involved, which I think says quite a lot, considering all the chaos we have around the FIA and considering this has been such a divisive topic so far.
Or it tells you how bad most meetings normally are in Formula One. But for me, I think what's important is we've gone from, as you said, this sort of pie in the sky, vague ideas, to something a little bit more tangible. There's still a lot of work to be done, but there's a bit of a direction. So it's not just everybody having their ideas and some unrealistic suggestions on what can be done in the short term. But one thing that I thought was very interesting is there's always the political angle here. Now, you always think, well, what are people seeing? What are people learning from the work they're doing behind the scenes on next year's engines? And I thought it was very interesting that Christian Horner said the most important thing from that meeting was those 2026 concessions and the chance for those who are behind to catch up. Now, we don't know where everybody stacks up. There have been little tiny hints here and there of where some people might be, but this would suggest that given Red Bull were kind of on the pro side of that, that's quite good news for them, and there's others as well in that group too.
Yeah, I think the difficulty is nobody knows where they stack up at the moment. It's all based on guesswork. I think you're interpreting what manufacturers are saying, and you hear conflicting things all the time. You hear stories that say Audi have done really, really well with their power unit looking great, and stories that they're miles behind. We hear stories that one manufacturer, their fuel suppliers not kind of nailed what they want to do, and they're hemmed in and concerned about this. So all these manufacturers, Red Bull, new powertrains, haven't got a benchmark of where things. So I think it's the uncertainty that has kind of prompted these concerns and this freedom to catch up. And I think if they felt that they were behind and they had no means of closing that gap and moving forward, I don't think it'd be very good. And I think what was important for the meeting is even those manufacturers that feel quite confident of where they're at, like Mercedes, I think are confident. I think they feel that they've made the progress they need. They don't know if they're P1, P2, P3, P4 in the manufacturer. No one knows yet. But I think they agree that making regulations that can allow the grid to be closer is better for Formula One than having a scenario, even in 2014, where one manufacturer is so far ahead, it kind of everything's defined from the start.
And I think what's very, very interesting as well is Formula One has tried to get to a place where it's realistic about what it can do, because of course there's a group of people who quite understandably want it to be like it was back in the old days, screaming conventional engines, no electrification at all. But it's very, very clear that the manufacturers will still want some kind of hybridisation, a little bit more in the style of what we had in the past almost with the old Kers that we originally had, that first came in 2009. And so that's the idea, isn't it, that it will satisfy the manufacturers because they can say, oh, this is a hybrid, this is good for technology, but also satisfies the show, the desire for cost savings amid the general concern about economic downturn globally, which is quite an important driving force here, and of course not throwing themselves too far down that 50-50 power hole that they sort of went down that's going to compromise 26 through 28, no question about that. No matter what they do, there's still compromises in the regs there to get the cars low drag in order to get the lap times up. But there seems to be a middle ground now that will satisfy manufacturers, satisfy what F1 needs. It could take a while, but F1 could end up in quite a good place, even though it's going to have to be here in 5 years' time that we say, yeah, this is where we've got to. It will all have started here.
Yeah, I thought Audi's position there was very interesting because Audi's been the most outspoken so far against a switch to V10s. It says it's only entered Formula One because of these hybrid regulations. It wants electrification. So it's been the one that's kind of had the potential to either be sidelined in this as the sole strong rebel against it, or be key to it not going forwards. But
well, I did wonder that if it was forced through, whether they might think, hell, we don't want any part of this, we'll sell out in full to the Qataris, who they sold a stake to.
Yeah, so we've had these rumours, but now the messaging from them today has been quite interesting. They've talked about 3 criteria that they see as essential for them to stay in Formula One. It's an efficient engine, there's electrification, such as some form of KERS, and that there's fully sustainable fuel. Now, a V8 engine with KERS and sustainable fuel fulfills all those criteria. And if we go down that route, I think all this rose-tinted thing about an old V10, normally aspirated, no KERS, and if you had a KERS on it with heavy batteries, it doesn't make the cars lighter. Tons of fuel gets burned up. I think it's very complicated. So I think we know roughly now what direction we're heading in. I think all the manufacturers are aligned. There is a consensus. I think there's a lot of details to sort out, but I think we now can see a roadmap. And the question is, 29 or 30 won't kind of make too much of a difference. But I think what is important is we've now got consensus to try to make these 26 engine regulations work. I don't think they're brilliant. I don't think they're perfect. I don't think anyone's pretending they're perfect. There's troubles to go to. But I think we can avoid the scenario of, as we get to whatever the season opener is next year, Melbourne or Bahrain, the rules don't work very well and we get calls, we need to scrap this engine and make the switch. It's not happening. The F1 teams tonight, I think the FIA and FOM know they need to make these 26 regulations work. And I think we've got a kind of framework to make that happen.
So the shock move, some kind of unity in Formula One. We've got a direction. There's still some hope for the people who like the idea of something a little bit more retro, and there's still hope for people who want something a little bit more forward-looking and progressive. So F1 may have found a happy medium.